We're live here. We're just going to see. We're going to be on in about 3 more minutes.
Countdown on T-minus 3 minutes. I hope all of y'all are watching from the comforts of your home and are not outside right now, at least if you're in North Texas. We have a cold front moving in right now. It's dropped from 50 to 40 degrees. It's misting. It's rainy. It's cold. It's windy. But this is Texas for you. So remember, for all of those who are joining on Facebook Live, welcome. And remember, you have the power to comment. And so tell us where you're from, where you're tuning in from. Are you from North Texas? Are you from Central Texas, down south, East Texas? Give us a shout out and share this with your friends, of course, too. And tell us, too, what have you been doing in quarantine? Have you been able to go out to the garden this week? And what are things looking like where you're at? We're going to give it a couple more minutes, and then we're going to give it a go.
Do you want to go kind of look at the blackberries?
Yeah.
Woo! We're going to just kind of try to walk a little bit to show you we're in an orchard. That's somebody from Colorado.
We're at the orchard out here. Of course, as you can tell, it's raining and drizzly, but we do have a number of small fruits. We have the vineyard, which is not completely planted just yet. We have 2 teaching trellis styles.
I think I did it to myself.
Oh. Technical difficulties.
No, there I am.
Are we good? Oh, it put you on your screen.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have our vineyard for those of you that are tuning in right now. We're going to get started officially in a couple minutes, but we're just giving you a little tour of the orchard here on this dreary North Texas day. And we have our vineyard of small fruit with grapes for wine, jelly, juice, and fresh eating. It's not finished. We also have our blackberry patch, which is doing really well. It's in bloom. Beautiful. We have pomegranates going right now, just starting to leaf out. We have peaches and plums, which are doing well. We have figs. We have another. Technically they're not small fruit, but the fruit is small, and you could consider it more of a shrub or tree. But we do have a couple figs, and it looks like most of them did not survive our winter. We had a lot of dieback, so the figs are in the back row there. We have pears and plums as well, and Tim Hartman talked about that. And on the right-hand side, we have pecans, we have jujubes and persimmons. So we have a lot going on here at the orchard. Lots of things to do, but today we're going to talk about small fruits.
Okay. I think we probably should go back.
So again, for any of y'all just starting to tune in, we're going to start in just a couple minutes. Tell us where you're from and what you've been doing out in the garden this week. A lot of stuff's happening.
We got Lubbock. We got, someone says the orchard looks great. That's good, because we're on location, and if it doesn't matter, we could be inside somewhere.
Yes, hopefully you're inside in the warmth right now. Janet and I are braving the elements, but there's a lot going on out in the orchard today, so it's time to get out there, rain or shine.
Okay. Woo. All right.
We'll give it a couple more minutes, guys. Again, if you're just tuning in, tell us where you're from. You have the power to comment on the chat box.
We got Fairview. We got Pat Ridings.
Fairview, all right. Also, remember, you can ask questions. This is an interactive program, and so you're able to type in your questions, and Janet will read them out loud if we can get to as many as we can. And we're fortunate we have a full team on standby right now over the line who are going to help answer questions as well. So we'll introduce them in just a little bit. You ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Will you tell them?
No, I will.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, all right, guys. Well, it is that time. Welcome. My name is Michael Cook. I'm a viticulturist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Behind me, you can't see her, is Janet Lamanek. She is running the show behind the scenes. She is the Denton County horticulturist, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Aggie Horticulture Live on Facebook. We've had a couple of programs. Yet last time you heard from Tim Hartman and Lisa Whittlesey about growing fruit trees in the backyard. Today, it's not the most beautiful day, but we deal with what we can, and we're going to be talking about growing small fruits in the backyard, not commercially, growing a couple small fruits in the backyard. What are the risks, the challenges, and the opportunities? And luckily, again, I'm a viticulturist with Extension. And windy, so sorry if the sound quality is not that great, but I am a viticulturist, which means I work with grapes, the growing of grapes, and my background is actually in horticulture at Texas A&M in fruit and vegetable production, and so I have a background in fruit. Talk louder. Okay, we're going to try to talk louder, but we also have a full team. Our fruit specialists are online right now, and they're going to answer questions. We have Dr. Larry Stein and Uvalde, my boss, no pressure, right? And then we have Kim Bitten out at East Texas Horticulture Agent. We have Stephen Yannick, I believe, is on Central Texas. Stephen works primarily with olives. Can y'all hear me now? Okay, we can try. We're working on it here. Okay, we'll scoot this up too.
I'll take the camera, put your back and stuff.
Technical difficulties, we're working. Do we want to move it over here?
Is this better? Oh no.
Okay. All right, guys, I know it's not, the audio is not the best. Turn up your volume all the way up on your computer.
Let's just do it sideways. And you may not, maybe a little more backlit.
Okay. Maybe I can get close here too.
Yeah.
That may be a little better. We're working through it.
Yeah, he's got a mic. It's on, right?
Yeah, we do have the mic. Let's make sure it's fully operational here.
Oh, it's 80 degrees in Corpus.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. It's 40 degrees here in Denton.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're better. So
okay, we're gonna roll with it. When life gives you lemon, make lemonade. It gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? So this is typical Texas weather, right? What do they say about Texas weather? You don't like it, wait 20 minutes. So we've waited 20 minutes, Janet and I, but it's only gotten colder. So I don't know, we may have to wait 40 minutes, but it's freezing out here. A cold front's blowing in. All right, let's talk about small fruits. And so we've got a great team with Extension Online to help answer your questions. If there's anyone I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, but Janet and I are here, and we're gonna give you a blitzkrieg nuts and bolts on growing small fruits in the backyard. We want something that's low maintenance, that's easy, that's productive, high quality, something that looks good. The great thing about small fruits is most of them, you don't need a lot of room. If you want to grow a blackberry or a grape, you don't need a lot of real estate in the backyard. You can, but you don't have to. And so we're going to talk about blackberries today, raspberries. That's going to be kind of short. You'll see why. We're going to talk about bunch grapes and muscadines later. Remember, I'm a viticulturist, so I can wax and wane on grapes all day long. We're going to need a 30-minute section just for growing grapes. We have grapes here at the orchard. We'll talk about those next time. So we'll talk about blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries, and also blueberries. Now, I have a fig tree here. Technically, figs are not small fruits. They do have a small fruit, but we do have some figs out here, and we can talk about those briefly. If you have any questions, remember this is the small fruit episode. If you have questions on other crops, you can listen to the past episodes. Fruit trees was last time. We've got more topics coming up. So let's get started. The first thing you'll notice is that it is raining here. And so I want to talk a couple generalities. Maybe you've grown small fruits in your backyard for years. Maybe being cooped up indoors, you want to get out there and spend some time working the ground and getting some fruit. It's really important to realize horticulture, gardening in general, but especially horticulture, is the most popular hobby in America. And that was true before coronavirus, it's true now, and it's going to be true after coronavirus. So I know a lot of us are cooped up right now inside. This is a great time to get out, to practice self-distancing, to be safe. Janet's got her horticulturally appropriate mask on. We've got our Purell and our Lysol, and we're self-distancing, but the garden is not closed. And so be safe, but get out there. It's really important. Gardening is a great activity to be physically active, pulling those weeds, hauling mulch, digging holes, planting plants. It's great for physical activity. It's great physiologically, eating healthy fruit, right? It's good for our bodies. And then also the biggest benefit, and what's really important being cooped up right now, is our mental health. And so getting out there, de-stressing, connecting with the outdoors is really important. So whether you've done it a long time or you're just getting started, get out into that garden and grow. And so we're here with Extension. We're here to provide you with research-based information. We're going to give you the nuts and bolts and work through some of these. So the first thing, the general thing, is it's raining. When you think about growing plants, especially fruits and vegetables, realize that most are actually grown commercially in desert-like climates. Water is essential for all plant growth. Water. Rain, on the other hand, has its benefits, but at the same time, if we're getting water droplets on our leaves, on our fruit, we have to be thinking about disease. And in most of Texas, Lubbock still has disease, but it's a little more arid, not as much disease compared to Deep East Texas that receive 50 inches of rain a year, or North Texas or Central Texas. And so thinking about rain, when I see rain, it's bittersweet, right? But be thinking right now, it's raining, and so disease is going to be a big problem for a lot of us even early on. Once we have green growth, we need to be thinking about controlling disease. And here at Extension, especially in the backyard, we focus on managing disease and improving quality through an IPM approach, an integrated pest management approach. What that means is that we're going to do everything in our power to minimize the use of pesticides, whether organic or conventional. And one of the biggest tools in your toolbox is not just spraying a chemical, organic or conventional. It's going to be getting out and manipulating, altering, cleaning that canopy to where you get good airflow, good sunlight. Because think, water on the leaves, water on the fruit's going to cause disease, and if we can dry that canopy out faster, we're going to have less disease issues. So we want to use a complete approach, using pesticides if we have to, but there's lots of other tools in our toolbox, and that's especially true with small fruits, okay? So be cognizant the rain is good, but it can also cause challenges, so be looking for disease and start utilizing IPM approaches if at all possible. I have an outline here because if y'all know me, you know I do not have a problem talking, and we only have 30 minutes. And so one other thing you're going to notice for all y'all that have been getting rain, it's been a wet season up here in North Texas already, and that is weeds. At my house, I've got weeds that are already a foot tall, and the grass is growing like crazy. Small fruits, especially when their first and second year, are really sensitive to weed pressure. So you put that grape in, that blackberry, and you don't pay attention to weeds, it doesn't take long for those weeds to compete for water and nutrients, and that can really slow the growth of our small fruit, and also it can kill them. So one thing we do is we're big proponents of adding mulch to the surface, not tilling it in, but adding it to the surface. You could use weed fabric, you can pull weeds by hand, but all of our fruits here in the orchard have at least a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch. That does two primary things. It helps prevent weeds from growing. You're going to see a couple, but those are they can easily be pulled. And the other thing it's going to do is, not today, but when we're in the heat of the summer, it's going to help conserve moisture. So if you're growing small fruits and fruit trees in the backyard at home, putting a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch around that plant is going to do a lot of good, and it's going to make your life easier too. So keeping weeds at bay is going to be important as well, okay? Another thing is, if you haven't done so already, understanding your soil on your property, even if you have one plant in the backyard, is going to be more power to you. We all love to garden. There's a lot of fun things to do, and sometimes people don't think learning about soil is that enjoyable, but it's critical, right? It's the bank, the nutrient bank. It holds the roots. A lot of activity happens. There's a lot of life teeming in that soil. And so If you haven't done so already, go ahead and take a soil test, and you can send that soil test to soiltesting.tamu.edu, our A&M soil test. We'll put a link in the comments there. Remember, y'all have the power to comment on this program, so do so, and we'll answer all your questions, maybe not all live, but we will answer every question. And also, as you'll notice with small fruits, there are certain small fruits that are really sensitive to water quality parameters, mainly sodium and calcium carbonate. Strawberries is one, blueberries is another, and so if you are going to grow these small fruits, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and send a water sample off to A&M, the soil lab there. It's not expensive, and it's great power, great information, and we know knowledge is power, right? So keep that in the back of your head. That's another thing to do in general. The last thing I'm going to talk about is we have a lot of great resources on aggihorticulture.com. Again, our fruit specialists online are going to be posting some links. There's a lot of great fact sheets on these small fruits, so take a look at that for more detailed information. I always say the last thing, and there's always one more. The other thing for all these small fruits we're going to talk about today, the question is always going to be, the first question is, do small fruits require full sun? Can I put them in an area that receives shade? The answer is, if you want fruit and you want a small fruit, blackberry, raspberry, strawberry, if you want them to produce well and to live long, they need to get at least 6 to 8 hours of full sun. Now, in Texas, we get lots of sun, and the sun towards the end of the day has that high temperature associated with it. So if you get 6 hours of sun, try to give your plants the morning sun. The afternoon or evening sun, you get that hot temperature, and that can cause a lot of issues, especially with fruit quality on a lot of our small fruits. So 6 to 8 hours of full sun is important for these crops. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about small fruits one by one, okay? So the first crop we're going to talk about, the first small fruit, are blackberries, okay? Anyone growing blackberries out there? So blackberries are considered to be one of the easiest crops to grow across the entire state of Texas as far as small fruits are concerned. One of the great benefits of growing blackberries is that they can actually tolerate this Texas heat in the summer. Okay, there are a lot of crops that can't, raspberries being one. They're related. They're both blackberries and raspberries are in the rubus genus. They're related, but raspberries just have a really hard time with our Texas heat. So blackberries right off the bat are looking good. Remember, we want something low maintenance. Blackberries, if you have one or two, they need to be spaced about 2 to 3, maybe 4 feet apart. And they can also tolerate our soils pretty well. And so blackberries do best in a sandy soil or a sandy loam. They need well-draining soil, but they can grow. We have a heavy clay here in North Texas. It is a black gumbo clay, and what we've done in this case is we've built up a raised bed. Yeah, Janet will show you if you can see, maybe zoom in. And so blackberries are pretty tough. They can tolerate our climate pretty well. They're fairly drought tolerant. They definitely need water and uniformly, but they're not like figs that are more water hogs, okay? And so anyway, so we have the blackberry patch. It might be hard to see, but it's the one with all the white flowers. They are in full bloom right now. It's beautiful out in the blackberry patch.
And it's gonna work. I'm too cold. I'm shaking.
Janet's shaking over here. Okay. So a little bit more about blackberries in general, though. They are biennial, and that's actually really important to understand. So they have two life cycles. It takes 2 years for them to reach their full life cycle, and so we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But blackberries in general have 3 things we need to pay attention to: their growth habit. They can grow erect, semi-erect, or they can be trailing. Now, some of you may have in the past seen a bramble patch out on the side of the road, or maybe you've got some ranch land out in central Texas or east Texas, and you've seen blackberries growing wild. Well, those are actually native. They're dewberries, and so what we're talking about today are improved cultivars from those dewberries, and we're just going to call those blackberries. And so they are the same thing, except dewberries are those natives, okay? They're wild. They are wonderful. They are thorny, though, and Janet can tell you that that's not fun. But if you're making a pie or you're going to make some jelly or just eat them fresh and it's something easy to do, go for it. We typically don't recommend transplanting dewberries in the backyard because we have a lot of cultivars that are much better adapted to the backyard scene there. So better improved cultivars, better quality, bigger size fruit, less disease pressure. Blackberries are tough, but they do get disease. Make no mistake, blackberries, some of the top diseases we worry about, especially in areas that receive lots of rainfall, lots of leaf moisture that can cause these diseases, is going to be rust, anthracnose. We can get crown gall even, Phytophthora root rot if the soil's not well draining. That's a soil-borne fungus that will rot out the roots. Double blossom, which is a fungal problem. So there are diseases, but in general, they're pretty darn low maintenance. And so, again, I'm kind of going back and forth here, but we've got the growth habit, that's the first. Now, even erect blackberries, once they get fruit, will droop down. And so trellis is going to be really important in many cases. And so a trellis is simple. It can be as simple as putting up a metal cattle panel and tying those canes of the blackberry. Tim Hartman gave a talk on fruit trees yesterday, and he uses a couple of bamboo stakes and ties the canes up. Anything we can do, remember, IPM and integrated pest management, looking at cultural ways to help minimize disease, and that is going to be to bring those canes up, maybe strip off a couple of lower leaves, get good airflow into that canopy where the leaves and fruit are, and get some good sunlight, and that's going to help minimize disease pressure. So having that cattle panel, having that bamboo where you tie up the canes too, even if you have, like here in the orchard today, we have an actual trellis with catch wires, and we keep those shoots as they grow in that catch wire so they're not drooping and touching the ground, and we get better architecture, better airflow, better sunlight, right? That's going to be the common theme today, is doing everything we can to minimize disease through cultural practices, and we can easily do it and help minimize that risk, okay? The other thing when we talk about blackberries, and this gets people confused quite a bit, is the fruiting habit. And so there are two types of wood on a blackberry. There is the primocane, and there is the floricane. And the primocane is the current season's growth, the green succulent growth that's coming up from the ground every year. And remember, blackberries are biennial, and so the first year you have the primocanes. Those are the vegetative canes or shoots. They don't have fruit, okay? Next year, that primocane is now considered a floricane. Next spring, the primocanes go through the winter dormant, they wake up and they're floricanes, and you'll get your flowers and fruit the next year. And so what we see out in the orchard right now is all floricanes. They're blooming. We see a couple primocanes coming up from the ground, but it's really important because blackberries do need to be pruned every year, and understanding what is your crop wood, the floricane, and what's the primocane is going to be critical. We'll talk more about that later. And then the third thing when we talk about blackberries is whether they're thorny or thornless. So thorny blackberries were the original blackberries, and thornless has become an important aspect of breeding blackberries. And so thorny blackberries, the reason why they're still around, there's a lot of great thorned blackberries, produce very good fruit. They're productive, and the fruit size is usually a little bit larger than the thornless. Those are the reasons why they're still around. There's a lot of great ones. The thornless, though, obviously don't have thorns, and man, I have drawn some blood trying to prune out that blackberry patch of thorn varieties. And so typically the yield is a little bit less and the fruit's a little bit smaller, but the quality it can be just as good. So I'm a big proponent of thornless blackberries, okay? But it's up to you. Soil. Let's talk about soil in blackberries. Again, I mentioned that blackberries do best on a sandy loam soil. They do best on a pH range of about 6 to 7.5. Remember, that soil test is really important for you to understand that data that you're going to get from your backyard. Remember, it's cheap, easy to do. We have information on agrihorticulture.com. And the thing with blackberries is they can tolerate a wide range of soils, even clay to some degree, but that clay has to be well draining, that sand has to be well draining. Just because it's a clay doesn't mean it's bad. There are many different types of clay soils out there. Unfortunately, here in North Texas, the soil we have at the orchard is a black gumbo clay. It holds lots of nutrients, it holds lots of water, usually too much water, and it splits and cracks or shrinks and swells, and the roots don't penetrate very deeply through that. So do we have a question, Janet?
We have a question.
Right.
Do we need 2 blackberry bushes for pollination?
Not necessarily, okay? So you could have one. making sure you encourage pollinators in the area can help with yield, but no, typically you don't need two. Yield is usually increased with more than one variety, but it's not necessary. Okay, great question. So soil is important. Again, if your site does not drain, it's holding water, go ahead and build up a berm, a raised bed with a lot of organic matter in it, and then plant those blackberries. Now blackberries you can grow from dormant rootings. If you order your blackberries from a nursery, usually they're going to come dormant. Those need to be planted in the winter. But, for example, here, I have a triple crown blackberry, and it is live. You can tell it's green, and this one can be planted in spring. So the dormant material in the winter, and in the spring, early spring, we can plant our live actively growing blackberries. Okay, so keep that in mind. Water, again, blackberries do need water. They're not that picky. We need to water frequently. Now remember, one thing I mentioned is it's raining today, so disease is a problem, but maybe you also, when it's not raining and you're irrigating, you have an overhead sprinkler, or you have one of those waterfall sprinklers that goes back and forth. We want to try to minimize that, and so we recommend drip irrigation with either drip emitters that are 1 or 2 gallons per hour, maybe less, or little micro sprinklers. You're still irrigating when you need to, but you're not getting water on the leaves and on the fruit. That's going to be another way to minimize disease. Okay, so we can drip irrigate blackberries. That's great. We use mulch for weed control to keep that soil moist. Blackberries, we're hoping to get 5 to 10 pounds once you get an established blackberry plant per plant. So we can get quite a bit. I talked about diseases already, and pardon my paper here, but it's important to stay on track. So let's talk about when you have a blackberry in the ground and it's been established for a while. And then we'll talk about the funnest thing, and that's varieties and different types of blackberries. So blackberries do need to be pruned every year. Our master gardeners have pruned the orchard here and the blackberry patch. Okay, I actually need to describe this or it won't make sense. So with blackberries, there are 2 types of blackberries. There are what we call floricane, and remember I used these terms before, but floricane bearing or fruiting blackberries, those are the traditional, the more original improved cultivars, and those ones are where you've got the primicanes, which are vegetative, and then you've got the floricanes, which actually have the fruit. Okay, that's the traditional. Most blackberries are going to be floricane bearing blackberries. You can tell you can ask your nursery which are which, but there are also a newer type of blackberry called the primicane fruiting, and that is where you have primicanes that will actually fruit a little bit later or a little bit earlier in the summer and fall, and then you also have your floricane crop. So both primicanes and floricanes are found on both types of blackberry, but you get a little bit earlier crop on the primicanes with a primicane bearing blackberry. Some of those are going to be at Dr. John Clark's breeding program in Arkansas, the Primark series. You may have Primark 45, we have it out here, Prime Jim, Prime Jan, Primark Freedom. And so, anyways, you have to understand what you have so you know how to prune it appropriately. But what you're going to want to do is late winter, very, very early spring, hopefully before everything leaves out, you're going to automatically remove any dead canes. The canes that you had that fruited last year, the floricanes, they will die, and you need to prune those out. They have disease on them, most likely, so get that out. And then also, you need to pick 4 to 6, maybe 7 of the floricanes this year, the canes that will fruit and flower and fruit. And so keep that, try to space them out. Remember, you're going to want to get good air circulation, good sunlight. So not having everything clump right close to each other. Trying to spread that out and thin it out a little bit. And then what we're going to do is once they start leafing out and growing, we're actually going to tip or cut back all of our primicanes and floricanes to about 3 to 4 feet. What that's going to do is that's going to increase productivity. So if we cut and tip back all the tips to about 4 feet, that's going to encourage lateral movement on that cane, and that's where we're going to better distribute our flowers and increase productivity. So every year at about probably mid-spring, 3 to 4 feet, tip back your canes. All right. Another thing is once the laterals come off of the canes, you can tip them back to about a foot and a half. That's all going to help. They're going to they're going to go too. And so that's going to be important for productivity and getting good sugar content. Okay. All right.
Can you mention strawberries and blueberries a little bit?
Yeah. So let me wrap up here on the cultivars. There are thorned and thornless. If you're looking for a thorny variety, Brazos is an A&M selection. It's been around, an oldie but a goodie. There's Kiowa, there's Rossboro. There's a bunch of good ones out there. You can look at the blackberry chart. Blackberries do have chilling hours, so you need to pair where you're at in the chilling hours you get on average with the right cultivar. So that's in our fact sheet as well. Thornless, one of my favorite blackberries is called Washita. Natchez is another great one that's thornless. If you want to grow a blackberry in a little container, Dr. John Clark released one called Baby Cakes. So that one's a cool one, very small dwarfing, great for container. Okay, so there's a lot of options. One last thing is Dr. John Clark just released this year a brand new blackberry. It's his 20th release. It's called Ponca, Ponca. Us horticulture nerds with A&M are really excited. We're getting these plants now and we're trialing them. John Clark said this is the best tasting blackberry he's ever bred in his many years of experience. So you might want to look at Ponca and give it a try. Okay. Now let's move on. So that's blackberries. Any questions while we're moving on to the next crop? We don't have a lot of time. Y'all are doing great. Ask questions. Okay. Let's talk about raspberries real quick. Raspberries don't do that well right now. We're researching them. We've got a trial going on in Fredericksburg with Jim Comas and J.C. Lewis. The problem is raspberries are related to blackberries, but they don't tolerate the heat well. So at this point, as far as research-based, we don't have any recommendations at this point, but there's some really exciting information coming down the pipe, and we hope to be able to share that with you in the future. So raspberries at this point, not low maintenance, not going to do well in our heat in general. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We're going to talk about grapes in another segment. I am a viticulturist, so
yeah, someone said they could listen to 30 minutes on grapes, so
yeah.
you're ready for that.
I can talk for 3 hours on grapes. Y'all know me.
Not
okay,
today.
Blueberries, especially in East Texas. All right, blueberries is another small fruit. Blueberries are, don't tell any of my grape people, but blueberries are one of my favorite things to eat, even more so than grapes. But I love wine. Okay, so blueberries. We don't have any blueberries out here in the orchard, and there's a big reason. Blueberries need acidic soil. Okay, blackberries do best in a slightly acidic to neutral soil. Alkaline gives some issues, especially with iron chlorosis, which actually I forgot to show you. If you can see, this is iron chlorosis on a blackberry, but blueberries are really sensitive. They're not the lowest maintenance small fruit we have. They are native to the United States, but they can be pretty tricky. Blueberries need acidic soil. They need a lot of organic matter, so compost, and they need very, very clean water. And so if you're in East Texas, you might have access to all of those, but a lot of us in North Texas, Central Texas can do blueberries containerized, but they're very sensitive to salt and calcium carbonate in the water, so you may see some burning issues, you may see some death. So we have to be really careful with blueberries, but you can containerize them. If you are going to containerize them, you need to bump them up in pot size to about 20 to 30 gallons at the end once they're mature. Okay, if you are fortunate enough to have a well-draining, sandy loam soil that's acidic with a lot of organic matter, maybe you put that in. You need to space them about 6 feet apart at least. It's variety dependent, but at least 6 feet. They can get pretty big in the ground, in the container not as big, but those two pretty good. So now here's something else. So we know water is important. We know that there are different types of blueberries, and you can buy blueberries on mail order catalogs all over the U.S. There's northern high bush, there's southern high bush, there's rabbit eye, there's high, there's all sorts of different types. In Texas, as far as something that produces well, high quality, lower maintenance, they don't have a lot of disease or pest issues in general in the backyard, we're looking for the rabbit eyes. Okay, so when you're looking at that name, you want to see, is it a southern high bush? Some of those do okay, or is it a rabbit eye? Rabbit eye are going to be the best for Texas, all right? Interestingly enough, rabbit eye blueberries do not have root hairs like all the other plants, so they actually have to rely on mycorrhizal fungi to bring water and nutrients into the plant. Okay, that's really important because you've got to take care of those mycorrhizal fungi in the soil to be able to have a happy blueberry. Okay, so let's talk. Blueberries do have chilling requirements, so you got to pick the right blueberry. for your area, even if it's containerized, and you're looking at about 15 pounds per plant. Let's talk about some varieties. I will say too, if you're going to containerize, do pine bark, composted pine bark mulch, and peat moss, something rich in organic matter and very acidic. All right, we're almost out of time. This has gone by so fast. Oh my gosh, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg. So I'm going to give you some rabbit eye recommendations. We're looking at some of the top 3, the best superstars. Right now we're going to be Climax, Tiff Blue, and Premier. There are some others, but those are the top 3 you really can't go wrong with if you're going to plant them in the ground or containerized. Again, different chill hours. Make sure you pair that correctly with your climate, and you might be able to get a little bit of a difference. There may be 100 chill hours plus or minus and have a longer harvest season. Okay, so you be in the range there, but plant a couple different types. Blueberries do need, in general, they need to have a pollinizer, so you're going to want more than just one, and bees can help increase the crop dramatically. Okay, so protect your pollinators, and you need more than one. Blackberries, no. Blueberries, yes. We talked about raspberries. The last thing I'm going to say, and then we're done right now, and we'll entertain questions on the chat, is strawberries. Strawberries are another small fruit. They are perennial, but in Texas we treat them as an annual. And the best time to plant your strawberry is not in early spring. We're going to go with the June-bearing strawberries, and what we do there is we get our strawberries from the nursery, and we plant them in the fall. We protect them from the cold with a frost blanket, and then we let them establish themselves, and then they flower in early spring. We get one big crop, great quality, it's not too hot yet, and then we harvest. If you try to plant your strawberry, and you can do it in a pot, you can do it on a raised bed on the ground, but if you try to grow that strawberry throughout the summer, you're going to see problems with productivity and quality. And so really treat strawberries as an annual. Plant them in the fall, harvest them in the spring. Okay, we've got some great June-bearing varieties. I will give you those right now because I can't keep them in my head. Chandler, Strawberry Festival, Radiance, All-Star, Sure Crop, Cardinal, and Sequoia. A lot of these you can find at your local nurseries to support local. That was a lot of information in just 30 minutes. And Janet is wiped out. I'm ready to go for another 3 hours, but we can't do that. So
would you say the strawberry variety is slower?
I will. Yeah, I'm sorry. I will.
And we have it posted too.
Okay, I'm gonna get real close. So the short day or June bearing varieties, we have Chandler, Sequoia, Strawberry Festival, Radiance, All-Star, and Sure Crop, and Cardinal. And some of my fruit specialists online may give some more recommendations depending on where you are, because Texas is big, right? And so some may do a little bit better in other areas. But we talked blitzkrieg on blackberries, strawberries, raspberries, more to come on that, and blueberries. And so we'll talk about grapes next time. Any questions, please drop us a line. We are here for you. AgriLife is open. We're practicing self-distancing, but not social distancing. So get out there and grow.
Yeah, I'm actually wearing my mask so everybody can see. There we go. Bye, y'all.